Welcome to part 2 of some of the craziest exploits in Rust. Players love to build in caves and they'll wall off the other entrance and use the one with the bucket to go up and down. And raiders figured out that you can bind disconnect to a key and use it while falling, and then when you wake back up you won't take any fall damage. This was used to raid these cave bases because this is usually the weak side, and a lot of the times players never even placed doors on this side of the base because they didn't know this was a thing. At one point you could use the snow machine to completely cover the face of the cave that you lived in. You would do this by placing the snow machine directly under the entrance to the cave, and by filling it up with 500 low grade it would last for 8 hours. No players could jump through from the outside, but you could leave from the inside and also throw items into it. Bears used to completely ignore your base and would attack you through your walls and foundations. And at one point there was a glitch where you could attach yourself to the bottom of a scrap helicopter so that you could glitch yourself through the ceiling of another player's base. You would do this by raising the scrap helicopter somehow and disconnecting underneath it. When you reconnected, as long as you stayed asleep, you were attached to the scrap helicopter and it could fly you onto the roof of a base where you could wake up inside of it. Rust players love figuring out unconventional ways to get inside players' compounds and bases, like this one time when someone figured out you can just jump on a wooden door to boost yourself. You could use this to scale the walls of the compound and even the top of somebody's base. If that wasn't enough for you, you could have your friend come jump on your head and it would catapult you into the sky. If you were ever stuck inside a compound and furnaces were next to each other like this, sometimes you could get it to bounce you high up into the air. And then there's a bunch of weird glitches, and it seems like there's one every other week for the past 10 years. Like this one where you were drowning in the water just from standing in it and it would do damage to you. If you swapped your weapon and shot it immediately, it wouldn't use any ammo right away. Or that one time when oil refineries and large furnaces would just refill their wood infinitely. Or when you plug 2 fluid pumps into each other and turn the second one on first, it would give you infinite water. There was a really crazy one where you could sit in a chair, get up to 100% comfort, disconnect, reconnect, and then you'll always have the 100% comfort, so it'll heal you no matter where you're at. You could also do this with a workbench, sit in a chair in front of it, get the status effect, and then disconnect and reconnect, and you'll never lose that ability to craft with the workbench no matter where you were at. You used to be able to build foundations underneath large water catchers, and even place auto turrets inside of them. Back when the roof tiles automatically created their sidewalls, you could create this crazy entrance to a bunker. I'm pretty sure this isn't possible anymore, but I remember a time when players used to honeycomb their honeycomb, or that time when you could put foundations under your foundations if you didn't have enough foundations, or that time when you could put a foundation inside of a foundation. You used to be able to do all sorts of crazy shit with this, and this was one of the ways that you could wall stack at the time. You'd be able to put a floor grill down underneath of a regular floor tile, and in combination with the wall stacking, it would completely seal in an area. But that wasn't enough, so we had to figure out how to get a door frame squeezed in between those 2 walls as well. And the reason you would do this is to prevent rockets splashing on the corners of the walls. And when you put more door frames down instead of walls, this is how you could door stack. So right here is 2 garage doors. And you could switch out one of the garage doors for a single door, which I'm not gonna lie, is kind of a vibe. And this wasn't the only time that wall stacking was a thing in Rust. Back when pillar building used to be a thing, you could stack up to 5 walls in a single square foundation. By building out and then building back at varying distances, you could use these pillars to have stability for these walls inside of a single foundation. When you were building inside of the old caves in Rust, you could place foundations inside of the walls and lock a TC on top of it, making it almost impossible to know that it's there. If you built your base in a certain way, you used to be able to open up some secret loot rooms in a design like this. I'm not sure how it actually worked, but it looks like a form of floor stacking was involved, to where if you forced a roof tile right here, it would unlock this triangle honeycomb piece where you can find access to a bunch of loot rooms. One of my favorite glitches of all time was when you could build on top of a door. By utilizing this, you could build some unique bases where you have storage up and out of the way. And just like in part 1, players will do anything to figure out how to get inside the terrain. The ocean that Rust generates when it creates a world spans the entire map, and you can find it underneath the terrain. You might think it's weird that players would want to do this, but you could see things above ground, like stashes and bags and bases. And there's a ton of things that go underneath the terrain that players could use to get back up from underneath here, meaning that they could transport themselves across the map with loot. There was a few ways that you could do this, but one of the easiest was by using boats. If you jammed a boat up onto a triangle foundation, for example, and built door frames around it, and then threw chain link fence inside of it, it would make the boat jiggle around. And then after enough jiggling around, eventually it forces itself through the thin layer of the terrain before it goes under the map. Sometimes the boat would fall down under the terrain in a way that you could swap seats between above and under it. And by putting in a little more effort, you could put a rib inside of a base and make it jiggle around in a similar way by putting a bunch of door frames around what you're pushing it into. Then when you close all the doors, you can have your teammates sit inside of it, all geared up and ready to go on a raid, and once it started falling through the ground, you yourself could get inside of it, and by finessing it enough, you could get the entire boat to fall through the ground. So not only could you get your player under the terrain and get your player out of the terrain, you could also bring an entire vehicle with you to travel around the map faster with a ton of loot. One of the craziest parts about this was you could see cave bases and stand on top of them. And if you know how to build cave bases, you know that they're quite open on the top most of the time, so you could just sneak your way right into a bunch of loot. And the funny thing is, when you were doing this, you're under the water that's under the map. So your team would be above you on a boat, and they'd have to swim under the water before they fell through, which is kind of funny to look at. Rust has also had its fair share of funny ways that you can get kicked from the game. Like if you just turned around and shot fast enough, eventually that would be enough to get you kicked from the server. Shooting a spaz shotgun too quickly was also enough to do the trick. Jumping on a player's head used to give you a fly hack violation. And there was this weird thing that if you threw a C4 on cargo, it would glitch out, and then after a few seconds the entire server would crash. There are way more things like this that used to kick players from servers, and it even dates back to Legacy when you could just walk into a door and that was enough to get you kicked. And if that wasn't frustrating enough, do you remember the times when guns would get stuck in the floor and you couldn't do anything about it besides watch it despawn? Or how about when bodies used to tease you like this, but you couldn't loot them because they're actually somewhere else? Imagine your whole group running up to launch site getting killed by this guy who's underneath the ground right now. This last glitch is one of the most infamous of all time in Rust, and that is when you used to be able to type 000 and C and unlock any player's door in the game. Imagine you were eating dinner or something, and when you come back, there's a dude with an AK that's got all the codes to your base. You could log into any server and go straight up to the biggest base that you see and take all of their stuff without them knowing. And not only did this work on doors, it worked on every single code lock, so you couldn't even lock your boxes. This had something to do with guest codes, which was a new feature at the time. So this means that players wouldn't actually have access to the lock, and that the owner of the lock could come change the guest code at any time and fix the glitch. But I'm sure you understand the amount of damage that was done to servers before the average player figured out that this was the cause. If you're a veteran Rust player that's been around for a while and remember any glitches from before like 2019, let me know in the comments what I haven't covered in this video or the first one before this. And if you want to send me videos of crazy glitches that you found that I haven't covered, there's a link to my Discord in the description where you can send them to me there. But that's all I got for you guys today. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, leave a dislike if you didn't, and I'll catch you in the next one.